This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. It's the Lorax, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. We have a nice full show. It won't be super long, but we do have every one of our segments. So we're just going to jump right into it with Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
If you have not read or watched The Lorax recently, here is our spoiler-filled summary of The Lorax, the book.
A young boy goes to visit the mysterious Onceler who lives at the edge of a polluted town. The Onceler tells him about how when he came to that area, it was a beautiful forest of truffula trees. He chopped down one of the trees to make a thneed, causing the Lorax, the protector of the forest, to appear. The Lorax implored the Onceler to stop on behalf of the trees and the animals who depended on them for survival, but when the Onceler's thneed became popular, he started a massive business to sell them. The land became more and more polluted, and the Lorax had to send all of the animals away, but the Onceler refused to change his ways, seeing only his business's success and his growing wealth. Eventually, the last truffula tree is chopped down. Without that natural resource, the Onceler cannot make thneeds, and his business crumbles. The Lorax leaves, and the Onceler isolates himself for years until the arrival of the boy makes him realize what has to happen. He gives the very last truffula seed to the boy and tells him to grow a forest so that the animals and the Lorax can someday return.
All right, here is the summary for The Lorax, the movie. Sourced from Wikipedia?
Yes.
Okay. So credit to whoever wrote this on Wikipedia. 12-year-old Ted Wiggins lives in Thneedville, a walled city where all vegetation is artificial. Ted is infatuated with a teenage girl named Audrey and decides to impress her with a real tree, which she desperately wants to see. His grandmother tells him about the Onceler, who knows what happened to the trees. Ted leaves Thneedville and discovers that the outside world is a barren, contaminated wasteland. He finds the Onceler, who agrees to tell Ted the story of the trees over multiple visits. The next time he leaves town, Ted encounters Thneedville's greedy mayor, Aloysius O'Hare, whose company sells bottled oxygen. Explaining that trees and the oxygen they produce pose a threat to his business model, O'Hare intimidates Ted to stay in town, but Ted continues to visit the Onceler. The Onceler recounts how, as a young inventor, he arrived in a lush forest of truffula trees. Upon chopping down a tree, he was confronted by the Lorax, the guardian of the forest. After attempting to force the Onceler out, the Lorax made him promise not to cut down any more trees. The Onceler used the truffula fibers to create the thneed, a knitted garment with numerous uses, which became a major success. His unscrupulous relatives arrive and persuade him to resume cutting down trees to speed up production, leading to large profits, but also deforestation and pollution. After the final truffula tree fell, the Onceler was ruined and abandoned by his family. With the region uninhabitable, the Lorax sent the native animals away and vanished into the sky, leaving behind a pile of rocks etched with the word "unless." The Onceler gives Ted the last truffula seed and tells him to plant it and make others care about trees. Ted returns home to plant the seed, but is spotted by O'Hare's citywide surveillance system. Enlisting the help of Audrey and his family, Ted flees to the center of town with the seed, where O'Hare chases him and rallies the citizens against Ted, claiming that trees are dangerous and filthy. Ted uses a bulldozer to knock down a section of the city wall, revealing the environmental desolation outside. Inspired by Ted's conviction, the crowd turns on O'Hare, whose henchmen banish him, and the seed is finally planted. As time passes, the land begins to recover, new trees sprout, animals start to return, and the elderly Onceler reunites with the Lorax. All right, there is your summary of both the book and the movie. So now you're caught up. If you haven't read or watched either of them recently, we have one. We'll see how this goes. We have one item for Guess Who. So let's go ahead and get to it.
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you'll get this, but
feel confident.
I just wanted to include it because I thought it was fun.
It is rare that we have a Guess Who for like a picture book.
Describe him? That's hard. I don't know if I can. He was shortish and oldish and brownish and mossy, and he spoke with a voice that was sharpish and bossy.
Okay, so I would say that would be the Lorax.
That would be the Lorax.
Yep, pretty straightforward. But yeah, there's a description of the Lorax. Look at that. And the drawing on the cover, he looks exactly like he does in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as close as you can with a 2D, that style of drawing versus the movie's 3D, kind of bubblegum animation style.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, all right. I have a handful of questions. Let's get into them all in. Was that in the book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
So a lot of times with these picture, kids stories that are expanded into feature-length films, a lot of the stuff is added for the movie, whereas that is not in the book. So that's kind of what I want to parse out is what of these elements came from the book or maybe were inspired by the book versus just wholly invented for the movie. Obviously, that's what was that in the book always is, but usually in these kind of episodes, usually a lot more of the answers to my questions are no, it was not in the book. But we shall find out. So my first question is the story set in Thneedville, a town made of plastic with no trees? Is that the setting for our tale?
So there is a town in the book. The very first line in the book is at the far end of town. And we do see a town in the background of that first picture.
Okay.
But we never go there, and the town is not named within the text. I guess it could be made of plastic, but that's never confirmed.
But we don't have a setting for like some of our characters that is this artificial world to juxtaposed to the natural, kind of world of the forest that has been decimated.
No, not at all. I do think that the addition of Thneedville works in the movie. I like that it adds an additional set piece, and I think it provides some additional commentary on the kind of specific anti-nature sentiment that tends to happen in the suburbs. Suburbs are for people who think they like nature but don't.
They can be. I think that's maybe a little unfair, but my parents live in the suburbs and
Your
they
parents
love nature.
like nature, yes.
I'm just saying. I think it's
I'm talking about that. The grass is a good example of what I'm talking about.
Right.
Lawns.
It is a very skewed
It's not
shallow impression.
Yes,
of nature,
it's not suburbs in the real world. It's not artificial in the way that Thneedville is in this movie, but it is kind of an artificial, crafted version of what nature is.
Yes, for
a
sure.
Sanitized version of it, if you will.
Yes. I also though think that it can be. I think it is important because I also understand the disdain that people have for suburbs and that sort of thing, especially on the left. I get it. It is it very much can be kind of an archetypal example of capitalism and the way it can destroy things. That being said, I think it is maybe not. And again, I'm not saying you were doing this, but I think a lot of people don't even recognize that the sort of like, I don't want to say the harm of suburbs, but like the again, I'm thinking of people like my parents. I don't think they're an outlier. My parents love the outdoors. They go camping constantly. They're huge nature recycling hippie people. But they also like the suburbs. Like they like having a lawn. And I think there is maybe like, I'm not saying, I think it's good. I think raising awareness and being like, hey, like, it's actually not super environmentally friendly to maintain a large lawn of, one of monocultural grass or whatever. Like that's not a great thing. I think that is a good thing to inform people of, but I think it's important to remember that a lot of people, it is an ignorance thing versus like a malicious thing. And again, I'm not saying you were implying that. Yeah, no, I agree. Thing. But yeah, I think sometimes, especially people of our political bent, can be a little dismissive and like judgy of that, just in general, that's kind of the what we do on the left. But and I'm guilty of it myself. But I'm just saying, I think that is one of those things that you kind of have to, I don't know, try to educate as opposed to judge.
Nuanced. It's complicated, as most things
Sure,
are.
as most things are. And I'm not trying to overly, centrist post, but I'm just saying that, anyways. So my next question is, I want to know, and this is one I assume is probably not in the book, if anything of this plot with Ted and Audrey comes from the book, because basically the big setup here is Ted has this crush on this girl Audrey, and he crashes a remote control plane in her yard one day, and they're talking. And she's like, "Oh, I wish she paints this big mural of trees on her back of her house." And she's like, I would love to see a tree. I'm obsessed with trees, and there's no trees anywhere anymore." And he's like, "What's a tree?" Blah, blah, blah. And then so he wants to find a tree for her to impress her. And I wanted to know if any of that whole plot came from the book, because to me that felt very much like a movie thing. From my memory, I have read the Lorax obviously as a child, but it's been over 2 decades probably.
So Ted is technically in the book. He's just not named, but the character that we see go to talk to the Onceler is a young boy. Character design looks a lot like Ted's character design in the movie. Audrey is not in the book at all. She's a movie edition. So Ted doesn't have the motivation of trying to get a tree to impress her in the book. Overall, though, I like that as an explanation for why he even goes to see the Onceler in the first place. It feels like the kind of dumb thing that a kid would do.
Yeah.
Especially when he's fantasizing about how she's going to fall in love with him when she sees this tree that he's gotten for her.
Yeah.
Now, the book, I don't think, needs an explanation for why he goes to see the Onceler, but I do think that the expanded frame narrative of the movie does.
If you're going to make it into an 80-minute movie, you have to add more meat to it. And this is not the worst way to have him venture forth into the world to try to find a tree. I also thought, as like a side note, I assume they're supposed to be around the same age, but Audrey in the movie is gigantic. And when I was watching the trailer, I was like, at first I thought she was like a 20-year-old and he was like a kid and he was trying to woo. And I was like, what is happening? And then I'm like, okay, I assume what's going on here is that they're supposed to be around the same age, but that she's gigantic because girls go through puberty, tend to go through puberty first and, get taller earlier than boys. And maybe he's they're both around 12 or 13 and she's just a lot bigger than him or something. But then later we find out she's in high school. And I assume he's in middle school. I don't know. I was just trying to figure out. I don't know. I thought it was weird.
I thought the same thing at first about that. Maybe they were just depicting that she's gone through puberty already, and he has not. According to Wikipedia, Ted is 12, so she's at least 2 to 3 years older. If she's bare minimum, right? If she's a high school freshman, she's either 14 or 15.
Probably, yeah.
I was a little bummed because I feel like you don't often see movies portray that aspect of puberty unless it's a one-off joke.
Right, yeah. But yeah,
there is that period of time in middle school and early high school when all of the girls are a foot taller.
A lot of times. I would say I was always the tallest kid in my one of the tallest kids.
You're an outlier and should not have been counted.
Yes, I am definitely an outlier in the statistics. But yeah, it is it is not something you see normally. And so I assumed that was what was going on here, is that they were roughly the same age. And I mean, I guess they are roughly the same age. She's not that much older than him, but enough older that she has definitely gone through puberty and he has, or is going through it, and he is maybe not quite yet, potentially. Or he's just a short king. Who knows? I don't know. So he needs to figure out where he can find a tree. So he's talking to his mom and his grandma about it. Grandma lives with them, it would appear. And his mom explains that the Onceler knows what happens to the trees. And I was wondering if this sort of quest giving came from the book of this wise older person being the Onceler knows, and that sending him on his journey. Again, similar to the story with the girl and wooing her. I assume that's not, because from my memory, the book didn't really have a narrative like that. But if that's the case, what is, if this isn't how he kind of goes on this journey in the book, what is it then that sets him off to meet the Onceler, I guess? Assuming it doesn't have the setup.
So there's really nothing that sets him off to meet the Onceler in the book. The book starts in media res, with the boy going to see the Onceler, like walking down the road towards the Onceler's house. And then that frame narrative gives way to the center narrative, which is basically the part of the movie that features the Lorax. So the book and the movie are structured similarly in that way. And then the movie really expands out the frame story with a lot of like new characters and stuff.
Yeah.
I would say that the book does have a narrative. It fully tells the story of the Onceler and the Lorax from start to finish. It's just the frame story is not as meaty in the book. And I think the decision to expand on the frame story in the movie makes a lot of sense. I don't think that the movie's version of it always works 100%, but I think it is serviceable.
Yeah, okay. Do we get any of the Onceler's backstory in the book? So in the movie, we find out that he like a little bit about, not a ton, but a little bit about his backstory. As he's telling his story to Ted, he explains like how he was at home and his family wasn't very supportive, so he struck out on his own to go to try to like make a name for himself. And he had this idea for this invention, so he sets up camp in the woods and all that kind of stuff. Do we find out any of that from the book?
Not really. We just see him arrive with his wagon and his mule and start chopping down trees. We don't get any of the movie's bits with like his family mocking him as he sets out to seek his fortune.
Okay, I assumed as much, but I just wanted to double check. So speaking of seeking his fortune, his idea for this is the Thneed, which is this miraculous invention. Initially, we aren't sure what it's going to be. It's this thing that does everything. And then eventually he makes it, and he uses the fuzz stuff on top of the trees, the trufala trees, or however you pronounce it, to create this thing, which is like a scarf. It's like a cloth. It's some sort of garment, but that also he says you can clean up messes with it, like that does everything. Obviously, intentionally silly. But I want to know if the Thneed comes from the book. And if it is this miraculous invention that does everything, and if so, is that the thing that leads to the forest being cut down?
He does make a Thneed in the book, and it is described as a thing that can be anything you need. And it does eventually lead to the total destruction of the Truffula tree forest.
Do we see it in the book? Is it similar at all to, like, is it a garment?
Yeah.
Is it, you know what I mean? Like, is it
looks like, let me find the picture here. Looks like, it looks kind of like a thin sweater scarf thing with multiple arms.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly what the movie is then.
Yeah.
So it is like
that's the best picture of it.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, that's exactly basically what it looks like in the movie, essentially. Okay, and that's what I was wondering. I couldn't remember, so cool. So then is the Lorax summoned by the Onceler chopping down a tree? So he needs to make his Thneed, so he chops down a tree, and it's the first tree he chops down, the Lorax just, boom, appears. And from my memory, the Lorax was just like another one of the animals in the book who just kind of like shows up and is like, hey man, what are you doing? And I don't recall him like coming down from on high, but is that what happens in the book?
I would say that this is something the movie like loosely nails.
Okay.
The Lorax does pop out of the tree stump. And it says, I am the Lorax, I speak for the trees.
I knew that line came from the book, yes.
There's nothing with the like thunder and lightning and like the the majesty on high kind of thing.
Does he do the thing? Because I have a memory of this where and it looks particularly silly in the movie, but like at the end, I don't think this is how he shows up originally. I can't recall, but at the end when he leaves and then comes back, he does this thing where he like grabs his butt and lifts it and he flies. I have a memory of that imagery from the book. Is that anything?
Yeah.
Is that like what it, or do you have a note about it later? Sorry, I don't.
I do, but that's fine.
I just, because I couldn't remember if that's how he shows up the first time, and I didn't think it was. I think it's only a thing he does later.
Yeah. The Lorax said nothing, just gave me a glance, just gave me a very sad backward glance as he lifted himself by the seat of his pants. And I'll never forget the grim look on his face when he hoisted himself and took leave of this place through a hole in the smog without leaving a trace.
Okay.
And there he is.
So yeah.
Flying away by the seat of his pants.
Yeah, okay, so that is exactly how, when he leaves, that is what, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't have that in here, but I as a question, but I I meant to have it because I was like that. I have a memory of that. Like that strike that's bouncing around somewhere in my brain. It's also such a specific thing that
Yeah.
you would have to assume it came from the book, and because like why else would somebody come up with that? It's such a weird detail. But yeah. So speaking of the tree that he chopped down, after he chops it down, the Lorax and the other animals have like a little funeral for the tree where they like put rocks around it and stuff. And I wanted to know if that was in the book. So it's a cute scene.
It is not from the book, but I did really like this scene. I thought it was very sweet. I also liked that the movie showed it again at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think is it not the same place where the unless stone is, or is it a different? Because he has that ring of stones.
I think it's different.
Okay, I felt like it was different too, but it would make sense for it to have been
Yeah.
the same place. But I think you're right. I think it is a different ring of stones that says unless. Does the Lorax threaten to curse the Onceler if he doesn't leave the forest? Because I thought that was going to go somewhere, and I had this memory that like maybe that's why the Onceler in the current time looks kind of like he does, is that maybe he does end up cursing him or something. But that doesn't actually really go anywhere. He doesn't curse him seemingly, other than like he doesn't like magically curse him. It doesn't seem like he just the Onceler reaps what he sows, basically.
Yeah.
And kind of, you know, is cursed by his own actions as opposed to something the Lorax does. And so I assumed that's not something from the book, or because again, it doesn't really go anywhere, and or if it's really just like a thread. It's kind of like an empty thread that ends up not really going anywhere. Anyways, does it come from the book?
No, that is not from the book at all.
Okay, because it was just a little confusing because like, oh, I felt like that was gonna mean something, or like he was gonna do something, and that doesn't end up happening. So I was like, oh, okay. Again, it doesn't need to go anywhere. I just thought it was kind of a strange. I was expecting it to go somewhere. Is there a billionaire in the book? I say billionaire, I assume, that sells fresh air, and he's like trying to hold a monopoly that is threatened by Ted's character trying to find trees again because he sells air and trees make air for free?
There is not. Almost none % of the frame story in the movie is actually from the book.
Yeah, that I expected as much. I did not think that was from the book, but I enjoyed it. When the Lorax leaves after the Onceler has ruined the forest, he leaves behind a stone that says unless. And I feel like I had a vague memory of that from the book, but I wanted to confirm. Does the Lorax leave behind a stone that says unless? That is a reminder of his warning that I read at the beginning in the quote, whatever that was. What is it? Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So does he leave an unless stone?
Yes, that is another thing that the movie nails.
And it is the same idea. It's like a reminder of the, because does he tell him that when he leaves the stone?
No.
It's interesting because that is what it is referencing, right? I would assume.
Yeah,
like at the end when he shows up.
It's something that the Onceler has to figure out.
Okay. I feel like the movie doesn't really go. Maybe I'm misremembering, but does the movie really cover that? I feel like we see the stone, but I don't recall the Onceler like pondering over it really. Or am I mistaken? There's a middle section where I got a little dozy because I got a little bored, and I'm not exactly positive if I remembered every detail perfectly from like the very like middle third, but I
don't think the movie really depicted him like pondering. I can leave.
I was about to say, what does he do in the book with
Okay,
it?
let me read a section from this. And all that the Lorax left here in this mess was a small pile of rocks with one word, unless. Whatever that meant, well, I just couldn't guess. That was long, long ago, but each day since that day, I've sat here and worried away. Through the years, while my buildings have fallen apart, I've worried about it with all of my heart.
Okay.
But now, says the Onceler, now that you're here, the word of the Lorax seems perfectly clear. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not.
I think the Onceler does say that to Ted, doesn't he, in the movie?
I'm sure he does.
Sure he does.
They did include that line.
Yes. For some reason, I'm forgetting that scene. It must have been a moment where I was either writing a note or I was just zoned out or something. But okay, a couple more questions. Does the Onceler then give Ted a seed to plant to bring the trees back? Or does anyone like plant the last tree seed? Is that part of it at all? Or I assume something like that happens because we don't just end with the forest forever decimated, but
So the book does end with the Onceler giving the boy the last truffula seed and tells him to plant it and then grow a forest. We don't see any of that happen like we do in the
okay.
book, though.
Well, then I guess by extension, because my last question was, does the Onceler get any sort of redemption? I thought this was a pretty sweet ending in the movie where the Lorax comes back and is like, hey, you fixed the things you messed up. Good job. Does that happen at all in the book?
No. Although I think this is arguably something that the movie expands on a little bit. So the book ends with the Onceler giving the boy the seed, like I said, and he tells him, plant a new truffula, treat it with care, give it clean water, and feed it fresh air. Grow a forest, protect it from axes that hack. Then the Lorax and all of his friends may come back. But we don't actually see any of that happen in the book. It
Right.
ends with the Onceler giving him the seed. I do think that this was a sweet way to end the movie. I also think it potentially undermines the ultimate point of the book a little bit. I think the goal with the book was to put that responsibility onto the reader.
Mm-hmm.
Ted in the book is a nameless reader insert character, always referred to as you,
Right.
right? And the book ends on this message about you being the one who can change things for the better. And the movie shows somebody else doing what you are supposed to do, and then everything is fine at the end. So you don't need to do anything, someone else will, and it'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting because I'm not sure it would be a very tough sell to make a movie, or be very difficult, I think, to make a movie that ended that way or that followed that perspective. I think the movie tries to kind of have both by giving us that quote after the movie ends, which is unless someone like, I think it just doesn't. It just
It just
that quote
shows
again.
up on screen.
Yeah, and so it tries to kind of keep that message of like, you need to be the change you want to see in the world. But the book is obviously way more effective at it by leaving that resolution
Unresolved, yeah.
and kind of asking you to go do that and go be that change, which I think works really well for a children's book like that. I don't know how satisfying or how much it would work as a movie, maybe.
You know, it is something that I'm kind of two minds about, because I get why the movie makes that decision, and I think it works for the movie.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the literal entire point
Right.
of this book
Yeah.
is that message.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it is something that it might just come down to the difference of medium and the fact that it is just something you can do in a book like this that is just maybe not possible in a movie. But I don't want to say it's not possible. I think it might be possible. It would be very difficult.
Yeah.
And you would have to really break some movie like not traditions. You would have to break some rules about how to make a movie in order to pull that off. Again, I think it might be doable, but it would just be hard. And I think the movie, like I said, I like the ending of the movie. I think it's sweet. But yeah, it definitely doesn't leave you as sort of motivated to change necessarily.
And I think it would be really hard because of the way that the movie fleshes out the frame story. If it ended the same way that the book did, we would be leaving the entire frame story unresolved.
Yeah.
So you would have to do the frame story in a completely different way.
Right.
To make that ending even come close
and that's what
to
I'm saying.
working
That's
in a
actually what
movie.
I'm saying, is that I think you would have to redo the entire movie, and that's what would make it so difficult, is that you would almost have to do, and I don't think this would be the only way necessarily to do it, but you might almost have to do this weird like first person perspective movie where the camera is the character or something.
Yeah.
It would be really strange. Obviously, it'd be a huge leap that a major studio would never do. That's something that you would have to get like a much smaller, like kind of independent film to do something like that, to kind of take that leap, to take that swing. But I think and again, there's probably even another way, maybe slightly more traditional way to do a similar thing and leave the resolution on the audience a little bit more. But I can see why the movie made the decision it does, but I also understand, like that is a tough one, because it is like also like, yeah, it's kind of the whole point of the book.
Yeah.
and kind of why the book is so effective and why kids went home and told their logging parents that they were evil. So yeah, I can understand how the movie is kind of a shortfall there, even if it is a very understandable shortfall. All right, those are all my questions that I had about things that were in the book. We do have a Lost in Adaptation, so let's get into it.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Where is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
This is not really a Lost in Adaptation. I've decided, I've made the executive decision on Lost in when we have an episode that doesn't really have a traditional Lost in Adaptation, which if you don't know, because we don't always have them, which is something we're like confused about. It's messy. Sometimes that merges into was that in the book. Sometimes it doesn't. Generally, the idea with Lost in Adaptation is, hey, there's this thing in the movie that I did not understand. Maybe there's more context in the book that like fleshes this out. Like, oh, okay, I get it now. Like if there was, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like maybe like in Lord of the Rings, maybe like in the movies, the whole backstory with like the swords, some of those weapons or something, or like, oh, like maybe there's more of that in the book that kind of fleshes things out. Or like the Ghost Army at the end, you're like, wait, what's going on with the Ghost Army and why is Aragorn able to control them? The movie does an okay job of explaining it, but like the book maybe has some more, background information. That's generally what Lost in Adaptation is. I've decided to also hybridize it so that sometimes it's just where we discuss thematic stuff. I don't know why.
Thematic stuff also often gets lost in adaptation, so I think that works.
True, and it also doesn't really have a great landing spot all the time, especially if it's something where it's like, okay, I don't know, like for you or whoever's doing the, better in the book, better in the movie stuff, sometimes that stuff doesn't always perfectly fit into one of those categories, and it also feels kind of weird to shove it off into like our odds and ends segment at the end. Sometimes we do. Sometimes that feels a little strange. So I think it works. Anyways, point being, this isn't really something I'm confused about, but I feel like it fits here. We talked about in the prequel that one of the producers specifically made the decision, with the directors and writers and stuff, to not make the Onceler like a monster, which supposedly in the book, I don't think we see him, correct, in the book.
We see his arms and his hands.
Yeah, but he could be like some sort of...
He could be anything. We don't know
creature,
what he looks
monster,
like.
whatever. But they decided to make him a human.
Yeah,
explicitly.
he's just a dude.
Yeah, or whatever. Maybe not a human, but whatever the human-like things in this universe are. Yeah. I think they're humans. They sure look like humans. But they made a conscious decision not to make him like some creature or monster or something because they didn't want to externalize the responsibility for what we've done to the environment. And we were both like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the movie does pull that off. We're like, we'll revisit it, see if we thought the movie did a good job of it. And I really think they did, because I really liked, I didn't love this movie. Like, I thought it was okay. But I did really like the message that they went for with the Onceler and kind of critiquing capitalism and the way that we have destroyed the planet. I think it goes about it in a fairly like well thought out and like nuanced perspective, from like a very well thought out and nuanced perspective, especially for a kids movie where it can be very easy to be like, look, the big bad villain who, because that's the thing. That's the thing. It's literally, the Onceler is not an evil guy. He's not the evil villain. The millionaire guy, the billionaire guy is that kind of in this universe, but even that we kind of find out where that came from a little bit in the movie. Whatever his name is, Aloysius O'Hare, the error guy. He's like kind of the like,
he's more of the like
traditional
CEO evil, supervillain
kind of guy. But the Onceler he's like literally just a guy who's like trying to strike out on his own and start a business. And he gets so caught up in how amazing what he's doing is that he like literally does not think about the impact it's going to have. That he does nothing out of malice or out of like, again, he does nothing out of malice. It is all just out of either ignorance or excitement for the possibility of what things could be or what he could get out of it.
And I do think in both the book and the movie there's some purposeful ignorance on his part. There's definitely like purposeful ignoring of what's going on around him.
Absolutely.
But I liked the decision by the movie to just make him a guy who gets caught up in what he's got going on.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. Because like, and there's a bunch of moments throughout the movie that kind of hammer it home. But there was one scene in particular that really stuck out to me where he's like designing his factory, and this felt like such like especially with people like Elon Musk and stuff, where it's just like they're just thinking about how cool this thing could be,
Yeah.
and they're not thinking about how it could affect everything else because they're caught up. And it's the Jurassic Park line, you're so caught up in whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think whether or not you should. And it's just that moment of he's got these blueprints for this cool factory, and he's like, man, this is so amazing. This will be so amazing. And he's like, he you can tell he is lying himself into he is because there is what you're saying. There is an element of conscious ignorance of lying to himself,
and lying to himself
about
and kind of choosing to ignore what's going on. And so there is definitely, and I think that's also good because it doesn't completely externalize his guilt and like make it like, oh, he's just a bumbling idiot who had no idea. Yes.
I think it really does strike that kind of perfect balance of like, like every decision he's making is somewhat understandable and reasonable and coming from a place not even motivated necessarily by greed, but just by like wanting to produce this thing and that he thinks will be cool and help people. And like, it is all coming from a place of like genuine, I would say like somewhat morally good, purpose, at least to some extent. Like, again, he does want money. He does want to make money, but he hasn't gotten to the point of the billion.
I think it's less money and more success.
Yeah, he wants to be successful. And he wants to, and I think he does really like this thing and thinks it will help people. Like, he's very enamored with this product he has created. He's very excited about it. And like I said, I really just think it does kind of perfectly walk that tightrope of not letting him off the hook, but also not making him like consciously a villain, because I think that is generally how these things work. I think generally the people who have ruined the planet have not done it maliciously necessarily. Like, I think it is true that most people think they're doing the right thing and think they're doing good things. Obviously there are outliers. There are people that, just don't give a shit or whatever. But I think, like I said, I think mostly it's people who have fooled themselves into thinking what they're doing is good
or not that bad.
And that the good they're providing outweighs whatever harm they may be doing. And again, it's not like it's a genius or novel idea that this movie is presenting. It's a very straightforward. But I think it does it very effectively in a way that a lot of children's media does not do. Like, a lot of children's media simplifies it down to this person's evil. They're doing this because they're evil. Or this person's an idiot. They don't even realize what it goes one extreme or the other and doesn't give you kind of the nuance that this movie gives you.
Yeah, far more nuanced than a lot of depictions of villains in children's media. I do think that there are seeds of this in the book.
Yeah.
There are a few moments where the Onceler feels guilty. For example, in the book, he says that he's sad when the Barbaloots leave. There's also this like recurring refrain throughout the middle part of the narrative where he basically says, I meant no harm, but business is business and business must grow.
This is true. Exponential growth.
Yeah. Until you can't. I was a little worried in the movie, like specifically when his family showed up and kind of like goaded him into breaking his promise about not chopping down trees. I was a little worried that the movie would totally take all of the responsibility off of him. But I don't think that happened. No. I think the movie handled it pretty well and ended up with something interesting.
Yeah, because I do think you're right. It could have very easily been like, oh, his family's the evil ones there. But I think it doesn't fall into that trap. It still keeps it. No, like it just, in that instance, it's just kind of showing that, yes, there are people that can matter to you that might kind of influence you, or you might trust people's, you might want to try to, loved ones or friends or whatever. You might do what they think is best because you think they know, or blah, blah, like they influence him, but it doesn't alleviate his responsibility in this.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't, it just doesn't alleviate his responsibility while still riding that line of making it him not being, again, an evil, malicious, cartoon villain. He's just a guy who made a lot of bad decisions that he thought were good decisions and ruined a lot of stuff. And he needs to make up for that somehow, which he kind of does, at least. All right, that was all we had for Lost in Adaptation. It's time to find out what Katie thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is that I get the movie's motif with the bottles of air, but also it doesn't make sense.
No, it's dumb, but it's
the town is surrounded by a wall,
yeah.
right? But it doesn't appear to be inside of a bubble. So how are they keeping the air clean just inside the town? Shouldn't they all be wearing like air filter masks that they attach the bottles of air to? And if they need the bottled air inside their houses, wouldn't they be replacing the bottles like every 3 seconds? It's a fun motif, and I especially like the parallel to companies selling us fresh water.
Right.
But I do think that it's one of those things that falls apart if you look at it too hard.
No, it definitely doesn't withstand scrutiny, but I think it works. I think it's fine. It's just a different, they wanted another version of, we've already gotten rid of all the trees or whatever.
Yeah.
So we have, and who do we have that has this interest in keeping the trees from coming back? Well, trees help with
Right.
air, blah, blah,
Air
blah. So like,
quality,
let's have this person who sells clean air. I think it works. Especially because trees are the main focus, and I think,
Right.
like, obviously the easier version of this is somebody selling like clean water. If the main thrust of the story were something to do with like toxic sludge in like rivers or something like that, that would be, like if it wasn't cutting down trees but like polluting the river, then like that was kind of the narrative, and the Lorax was the spoke for the rivers or whatever, then that would be the angle you would go. So I think it works, and I think. Again, I think it's fine. I had no problem with it. Yes, it is one of those things that's like, yeah, it doesn't really whatever. But it's a doctor, like it's a whack. These creatures exist. Like it's a very magical universe already. So it wasn't something.
But you know what? I'm here to critique.
That's fair.
This is like a little weird thing, but I thought the old Onceler sounded too similar to the Lorax.
You're not wrong, because I had a suspicion. I actually wrote it down and deleted it, that I thought it was going to end up being the Lord. I think the movie wants you to think that.
Do you think that's what they're doing?
Well, because I do wonder, because I was like, because he's always hiding his face.
Yeah.
And he's behind, and specifically like the main middle part of his face, but you can see the mustache.
Yeah.
But you also can tell it's not the Lorax because you can see his arms are way too, like he doesn't look proportionally like the Lorax, but there is enough, and the way he's like hidden in shadow and stuff made me wonder if they were trying to like trick, because I actually was like, okay, is it going to end up that this person he's talking to is actually the Lorax, who is essentially like kind of like Willy Wonka style, like screening,
like waiting for
the perfect person to come along to give the seed to you know what I mean? I was like wondering if maybe that was a twist they were gonna do, and then I don't know how that would have worked with the Onceler story and stuff.
No.
And I was like, that doesn't really make sense. So I like kind of was like, and eventually I was like, no, I'm pretty sure that's just the Onceler. But there was enough details about it that felt kind of strange. Like, why are they keeping him in shadow?
That's kind of a weird red herring if that's what they were trying to do.
No, I agree. It doesn't, because it doesn't really mean anything or go anywhere. But I did agree, because he sounded a little bit like he was doing a weird thing with his voice. Like it just all added up to him. Like, is that the Lorax, or what's going on here? No, it's definitely not the Lorax. I agree, though. It was strange.
There was a couple of lines in the movie. There was one point where the Onceler says he finishes making the thneed, and then he says, nothing unmanly about knitting. And there's a lot to unpack there. But also he was sewing. He wasn't knitting.
Oh, was he?
I'm like, that must be a joke, right? Because there's no way that made it through all of the rounds of everything without somebody being like, he's not knitting, he's sewing. But it isn't funny, so like, is it a joke?
I don't know what the joke would be. I don't know what the angle is. Like, if that is a joke.
But he does knit it in the book. They very clearly show him knitting, but then in the movie he's sewing, but he says that he's knitting. Is it a mistake or is it a joke?
I don't know. I missed. I didn't see. Must have been writing something, so I didn't see him sewing. So I just assumed when I heard that line, because I do remember
Yeah.
that line. I just assumed we saw him knitting it. So I was like, oh, it didn't even strike me as a joke because again, I didn't see that he was. I have no idea. I have no answer for you because again, it's not a joke that I don't. I don't,
Yeah.
or at least I don't understand.
'Cause I don't know what the joke would be.
would be there. So I have no
But
idea.
I don't know how that line would make it through everything without somebody at some point being like,
Are you sure he didn't knit it for a while and then do something at the end to finish sew it like we saw or something?
I'm
Like
99% positive the only thing we do is see him do is sew.
okay,
Because he's got a needle and thread.
okay, I'll take your word for it. Like I said, I don't remember seeing it, so I don't know.
My other line was just kind of a woof.
Yeah, it's just
When the Wensler's family shows up and it's like his great
aunt
or
grandma
something like
yeah.
that, who's like a crotchety old woman.
Yeah,
And the Wensler says to the Lorax, like, you wouldn't hit a woman, and the Lorax is like,
that's a woman.
that's a woman?
Yeah,
Woof, you guys.
yeah. You know, those jokes were funny in 2012, apparently.
I guess.
Or society has deemed them funny.
The parts about when he has to send away all of the animals, I thought were better in the book. At the end of the movie, they all just kind of leave at the same time. In the book, he sends them away, like each group of animals, he sends them away like one by one, like off to find a better habitat. And there's more like specific notes about like, well, the Barbaloots have to leave because there's not enough food to go around because they get the food from the truffula
so like
trees.
as
and,
certain things are
as
certain
things are
elements
progressing,
of the environment are ruined, different animals
Yeah.
need
different animals have
Yeah, I
to
think that
vacate
makes
the
sense, yeah.
premises.
Yeah. And it definitely, I think that would have been good to see too, because it also
Mhm.
adds to kind of the Wensler's like self, like
Yeah.
ignoring the problem is like if we keep seeing these animals having to leave slowly over time, and like it amplifies his negligence, I
Yeah.
guess. Whereas at the end, it's like, oh, surprise! Oh, and now all the animals got to leave. I mean, it's not that different. Like, obviously, you should have known though, cutting down every tree in this. Like, again, it's not that big of a difference, but I do think that that is an effective narrative beat to have like this growing
Hmm.
sort of ominous, like, and now more and more and more animals are being displaced.
My last note here, in general, I think the movie's frame narrative is a little underdeveloped. It doesn't not work, but none of the characters aside from Ted are really developed at all. I thought the world building was just like a little surface level, and I didn't think the stakes ever felt that high.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mainly because we don't spend that much time with any of the other characters. I did really like I thought Audrey was basically nothing. Like she's just
Yeah.
like not in the movie
Yeah.
mostly. But I did like his mom and
Mhm.
the grandma.
Yeah.
And I think both of those have to do with the performances because it's Jenny Slate plays his mom
Mhm.
and Betty White
Yeah,
plays
yeah,
his
yeah,
grandma. And I thought they were both really good and fun. Like I enjoyed his mom's performance a lot. But I would agree that it's not a super well developed. It serves its purpose, but it's not like
Yeah, it
super gripping or
works,
fun or-
but
yeah.
it's just like a wee bit underbaked.
yeah. No, I'd agree, which is kind of my opinion on the movie as a whole. So generally, despite the stuff I really like about it. All right, time to find out what Katie thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
The first time that Ted goes outside of the walls of the town, and he comes across and like almost runs into, we see like the shadowy broken down axe machines.
Yes, and he like almost
Yeah.
gets decapitated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something like those weird like multiple chopping machines are something that we do see in the book.
Mhm.
So I thought that was a fun addition.
Yeah, I thought it was cool because you see it and you're like, what the heck is this? And then later during the flashback, we actually see it
Mhm.
running and operating. And you're like, oh, that's what that was.
Yeah. I thought the Lorax trying to get rid of the Wensler was interesting. Like the scene where they try to float his bed down the river. Although I could have done without Fish Mission Impossible.
Yeah, There's quite a bit in this movie that I found kind of grating and poorly aged, not from like an offensive or like, oof, what are we like? There are a couple things, like mainly really only that like that's a man line was like the only thing that really stuck out to me. I was like, oh, all right. But just more like aged poorly in the sense of which is I think Illumination is guilty of more than maybe like Pixar and some other, other like animation studios of like, not that to be fair, Mission Impossible was not a timely reference in 2012 necessarily. But like they do that kind of stuff, I think, more often that feels like
and I mean,
pop
and
culture
that's the thing
referencey
too,
in a way
is
that's
that
like
you're using a pop culture reference that's already tired.
yeah.
Like people are already sick.
Yeah,
of
we've
it.
already made the like done the like Mission Impossible, like the Mission Impossible soundtrack when somebody's doing like a sneaky thing was like played out in like the early 2000s.
It was played out when Shrek 2 did it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, like it had been played out for like at least close to 10 years at this point. Maybe not 10 years, but close to it at this point. And we're doing and there's like a handful of those kind of things throughout the movie where it's just like I could do without that.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that Audrey had a mural of truffula trees painted on like the back of her house. I liked the moment where she goes in the backyard and sees that her mural has been sloppily painted over, courtesy of O'Hare Air.
Yeah, it's got a big sticker that says courtesy of O'Hare or whatever.
I liked that the Onsller's family was really obnoxious.
Yeah.
His family does show up to help him in the book, but we don't ever like interact with them. So I liked that they were just really, really obnoxious.
Yeah.
I like the little scene where we show how the Onsller's actions paved the way for O'Hare. After his business goes bust, we see O'Hare as working as like a janitor or something.
Like a kid, I assume. 'Cause he's got braces, so he's supposed to be fairly young. And yeah, and his partner's like, I wonder what the next $1 billion idea will be.
Yeah, like as he coughs from inhaling smog.
Yeah.
And we see like the little light bulb go off in O'Hare's eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was fun. Yeah, I liked that a lot.
And I also liked at the end when they're trying to find some dirt to plant the tree, the way they find the dirt is by beheading the statue of O'Hare.
Yes.
And like knocking a big crack in the fake ground.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right, we got quite a few things that the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
So Audrey, when we're first talking to her, she describes trees as softer than silk and they smelled of butterfly milk, which is the description of truffula trees from the book.
In the prequel episode, a critic was like mad.
Yeah, the critic hated that.
Hated that they quoted it, and then another character goes, "What does that even mean?" And they're like, "I don't know," like kind of like making fun of it. I thought it was fine.
I didn't get the vibe that they were making fun of it.
They're pointing a little bit fun at the fact that it's like a little fanciful and silly, but like I don't know, I didn't whatever.
It's a weird thing to nitpick.
Yeah.
In a movie of like other things that you could have nitpicked.
It just seemed like especially because the movie I think does a fairly good job of staying true to like the message of the. It's not like the movie like perverts the message and then also like makes fun of his prose. It's just like they're kind of like pointing. I don't know.
So the another thing the movie nails is the description of where the Onsller lives, at the edge of town where the grickle grass grows. The payment that Ted has to provide in order to see the Onsller, 15 cents and a nail in the shell of a great-grandfather snail or something like that. He also lives on the street of the lifted Lorax. That's from the book.
I don't remember that. What is that? Is that like what it's called?
Yeah,
like
that's
what is
the
that?
name of the street that the Onsller lives on, is the street of the lifted Lorax.
Okay.
Also, the Onsller,
I guess
named
for when the Lorax
when
leaves
he
and
picks
lifts himself up. Okay,
and leaves.
fair enough.
The Onsller's weird house that kind of looks like the burrow from Harry Potter.
Like very much like a. And I liked that it seems like because he had this gigantic factory mansion thing, and that over time, as he's sort of pared it down to like a much more minimal, less extravagant lodging.
Yeah, for sure. The first thing that we see of the Onceler is just his eyes through the boarded up window, and then the green gloves. That's also all of we see for the rest of the book, but the movie did nail that initial like visual.
Yeah.
The scene where the Onceler is tossing everything out of his wagon is from the book. The word biggering, they mention, I think, a couple times in the song. That is directly from the book. That's something that the Onceler says all the time. He's biggering his business. Which is interesting because it reminds me of Trump.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, it really does. Yeah.
How did that?
Yeah. Wild.
Like, did Dr. Seuss just predict that?
Yeah.
I don't.
Or Trump read the Lorax and did not understand which seems very
likely. He just
likely.
latched onto that one word.
Yeah. Which he said bigly, right?
Bigly was his thing, yeah. With the way that the Onceler's business comes crumbling down, where he's like, nothing's gonna stop me, and then boom, they immediately chop down the last truffula tree. And we already talked about those. Lorax lifts himself by his pants, flies off through a hole in the smog, and then the line, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not.
There you go. So quite a few things that the movie nailed. We got a couple things to talk about in odds and ends before we get to the final verdict.
I thought it was interesting that they gave Mr. O'Hare the Farquaad haircut.
Yes.
It's kind of a like blockier version of it.
It also reminded me of what's her name from The Incredibles.
Yeah.
Mode.
Yeah,
Mode.
she's kind of, it's like kind of an Edna Mode
kind of thing.
That very like blunt bob with the bangs.
With the part in the middle. Yeah. The gag in this movie where he's like trying to get to find the Onceler, and he comes to this like big ravine, and then he sets up a ramp and then goes to ride his little unicycle thing over it, and then immediately falls off the cliff. It got me. I saw it coming from a mile away, but I chuckled. I don't know what it was about that. A little detail that I thought was very funny is the billionaire guy, O'Hare. He has these henchmen, and when he gets in and out of his car, they don't like lift him up and put it in because he's tiny. Yeah. And instead of like lifting him up, which would be the easy joke, is like they like pick him up and put him in the car, or like pick him up and put him out, which is like, sure, that would still be fine. But they use their hands to create like stairs for him as he like goes up. They like move their hands and create like a moving staircase. I thought that detail was very good.
I have to say that Danny DeVito is great casting for the Lorax.
No, I think he's fantastic.
Danny DeVito basically is the Lorax.
Yep.
So it works.
Yeah, it totally works. I thought it was funny that they did the floating bed prank like in The Parent Trap.
Yeah.
We were talking about in Parent Trap when they put in the movie where they put the what's her name, the evil girlfriend,
Meredith,
out in the lake on the
float her out on her inflatable mattress.
Yeah, and in this they put him down the river. They put the Onceler down the river on his mattress, which I thought was funny. I will say, apart from obviously the Mission Impossible gag, but just so this is a musical movie, and I thought most of the music in this has not aged amazingly. Yeah, in the sense that it's kind of just like really mediocre pop of circa 2012. Yeah. Like I thought the end song was okay. Like that one had aged the best, whatever that final big number is. Because then that turns into the credit song kind of. It's something like grow, something.
Yeah, something about
growing,
letting the
let
seed
it grow or something like that. Yeah. I thought that one was okay and had aged pretty well. Which is funny because I do think that a lot of the songs were written. They were co-written by two people, and one of them was Cinco Paul, who was the writer on this, who wrote all of the music for Schmigadoon. Yeah. So he's the showrunner and writer on Schmigadoon, but he also writes all the music for Schmigadoon. And I think what would have worked really well is if they had chosen, like, for this, if he had gone back and done, because he's really good at like aping like pre-existing musical stuff, which is what Schmigadoon is. It's just, if you haven't seen it, each season they go through like different eras of musicals, and there are songs that are, some of them are very specifically like, this is basically Cell Block Tango or whatever
Yeah.
from. But then there are other ones that are more kind of broad, like
broad strokes.
Broad strokes, like this kind of captures the essence of Rent or whatever, or not Rent, but like they haven't gotten to that
or
area
like
yet. But like
the essence of
Jesus
the
Christ Superstar.
1950s
Yes.
movie musical or whatever.
Yeah, and so I think that this movie would have benefited if they had gone that direction and like chosen an older genre of like musical kind of to like base the music around instead of just trying to write contemporary pop songs.
Yeah.
I think maybe, I don't know.
I mean, I don't know if you could have made it worse by doing
True.
that. So
Again, I didn't hate any of the songs, but I also didn't really like any of the
they're
songs.
just forgettable.
Yeah. Whereas I really like a lot of the music in Schmigadoon. I think it's really fun and good, for what it is. Whereas this, I was just like, so. But also, this is a decade ago. He's probably learned a lot about writing music and musical numbers since then. So I thought there was a very fun detail when the Onceler is walking through his big, vast, evil estate. He has a "Too Big to Fail" poster on his wall. It's just a picture of him and it says "Too Big to Fail."
Yeah.
It's a nice
We're
little reference.
not very far removed from 2008.
Yes. No, we're very close to the,
And especially
the
like
Great
when they were
Recession.
like writing it and conceptualizing it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I had a thought at the end of this movie, which was that I wonder if his grandma is somewhere in that original group of townspeople, like all of the people who come to get a Sneed in that one number.
Oh.
Like as a little girl.
Probably, yeah.
I didn't think to look because why would I? But then at the end, she says that she remembers trees.
Yeah.
So she could be like somewhere in that group of people.
And she's probably about the age the Onceler is at the end of the movie. So yeah, she probably was in there and we just missed it. That probably is a little not Easter egg, but that probably is.
Like a little detail.
Yeah.
And if it's not, that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah. So apart from the music, which I wasn't a huge fan of, I think the movie's other biggest weakness is that it isn't very funny.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's a pretty serviceable movie. It looks pretty good if you don't mind the style of it's the Illumination style, which I'm not the biggest fan of. It's not very memorable or unique or interesting.
It's very bright and very like smooth
and
looking,
round and plasticky, and like it's fine. Like it looks fine. And so like it looks okay, but it's just not particularly funny for like an animated kids adventure movie. Like if you're comparing this to something like obviously something like Toy Story or whatever, but even some lesser like Pixar movies, I would say this isn't even like that. It doesn't even hold up to some of the lesser offerings from some of the other animation studios in terms of humor. I like I said, I liked the gag where he falls off the ramp, and that was like the only time I chuckled at the whole movie. Maybe I'm sure there was a couple other moments, but it just really wasn't that funny, which was disappointing.
Oh. If you have little kids, let us know.
Yeah, maybe
let us know if your
know.
Kids think this movie's a laugh and a half. I just didn't like. There weren't even that many like jokes in
That's
it.
what I mean.
Felt
Yeah,
like.
it didn't even feel like they were trying to make it that funny, which was interesting. Like. And again, I don't think they need. I'm glad they at least didn't go overboard with like referential humor and stuff, like which could have been really bad.
Oh, that could have gone really sour.
Awful. Like they didn't go overboard with that, which was good. But also, I think it could have used some more jokes. I just think it needed some more humor to really kind of punch it up and make it a little more memorable.
I did have to chuckle, though, that the end of the movie is basically the nature is healing itself meme.
Yes, it really is. Yeah, absolutely. And then my last note, which it blew my mind, we got to the end of the movie, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, wait a second. Especially because the end number, I was watching. Yeah. I was watching for this. And I was like, did Taylor Swift legitimately not sing a single note in this musical?
Yeah.
And I don't think she did. Maybe as part of maybe
as part of the ensemble.
But like she does not get a single her own.
Everybody
moment.
else has their own verse in the last song.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that until you said something at the end of the movie, but yeah. Like, how are you going to hire one of the biggest pop stars in the world and not have her sing a single solitary note in your movie musical.
Blew my mind. I was like, wait a second. Was that like in her contract? Was she like,
maybe,
I'm not gonna sing?
She was in, like, around this time period, she was in a handful of movies, and she might have been trying to branch out to be like
an actor.
Yeah, I'm an actress.
I don't want to just be the person in your movie to sing because that I'm, a famous pop star. Yeah, I don't know. It just was very funny to me that I was like, wait, I don't think she sang at all. Like, you would think for sure it's wild too, because you would think they would have for sure, and it almost feels like it would have had to be a thing where she was like, I don't want to sing. Because it seems very obvious to me that if I'm making this movie and I cast Taylor Swift as the female lead, basically, kind of. I mean, again, she's not in that much of the movie because it's mainly about the Onslers' backstory and then Ted. But she's ostensibly the female lead in the movie, that they would have written a song specifically for her.
Or you're at least going to give her a line in your final number. At least,
but I'm not just doing that. I'm getting her writing a song for her that we can hopefully sell. And maybe that's like I'm saying, I'm writing a song that is like hopefully going to be a breakout, like the song from this movie.
Yeah, it's going to be this movie's Let It Go. It's going to get radio
like
play.
That. Yeah, something like that. And my only guess is that she was like, no.
Yeah.
And her agent was like, no.
Imagine hiring Taylor Swift to be in your animated movie musicals, and then her lawyers are like, Miss Swift does not sing in the movies.
Yeah. And you're like, wait a second. That's the reason we hired her. Which, again, I get it. I get her not wanting, I'm not even necessarily like, I get if that is what it was. If she was like, I don't want to.
Yeah, that's her choice.
Yeah, it's fine. And I understand, wanting to branch out and stuff like that. It is just kind of funny at the same time. It's like, well, okay, it's a musical, and like you're one of the main characters. Like, you got to at least sing a verse. Like, it's just weird if you don't. Not even like, regardless of who you were, it's a little weird that your character is not singing at all. And it's just Just thought it was funny. Before we get to the final verdict, we wanted to remind you can do us a giant favor by heading over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us there for a few bucks a month. Get access to bonus content. We just released, it's not out. It'll be out this weekend. Probably tomorrow, or not, probably Friday as you're listening to this. Some point in the next few days as you're listening to this. We recorded our bonus episode on Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl. So if you want to hear what we had to say about that, we both love that movie. It's one of our favorite action adventures. So if you would like to hear us discuss that, that'll be out very shortly. Or if you're listening to this in the future, it's already out. Just head over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Give us $5 a month and you can listen to that bonus episode and the backlog of all of our bonus episodes. You can also support us for $15 a month to get access to priority recommendation, whereas if you have a book or a movie that you would love for us to talk about, just go ahead and recommend it. Support us for $15 a month and stick around a little bit, and we'll do it eventually once we can fit it in as soon as we can. You can also do us a giant favor if you don't want to support us on Patreon by giving us a 5-star rating and review on whatever podcast catcher you listen to us on, and also by heading over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Goodreads and following, liking, whatever you got to do to see our posts and interact with them so we can hear what you have to say about the Lorax. But first, Katie, it's time for your final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
The book, The Lorax, is a mainstay of children's literature. A subversive classic that tackles an important social issue while also being a textbook example of Seussian style in both art and prose. The movie is perfectly fine. And I mean that. There's not really anything wrong with this film. I found it a little boring and occasionally grating, but I acknowledge that I'm not the target audience. Then again, I'm also not the target audience for the book, and I found it just as impactful at 33 as I did at 5. The main changes that the movie makes to the book are beefing up the frame narrative, as well as the center narrative, albeit to a somewhat lesser degree. And I don't have any major qualms with the choices that the movie made in order to do that. However, I don't think the story needs any of that extra meat to be meaningful and make an impact. Although the movie expands on the theme somewhat and adds other elements that play well with the existing narrative, none of it is necessary. And even within the past decade since the movie came out, I think it's already obvious that the movie just doesn't have the staying power of the book. To quote my own final verdict from our review of 2000's How the Grinch Stole Christmas, I don't think it's been elevated into something that's better than the book. It's a fun supplement to the book, but I wouldn't call it a good alternative to it. And for that reason, I have to give this one to the book.
There you go. Very good stuff. Katie, what's up next?
Up next, we are closing out our summer series 2023 with the final installment of the Divergent series.
Yep.
Allegiant.
There you go.
And it's singular movie,
which we will discuss in the next prequel episode.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you don't know, there's one movie. There was supposed to be two. There's only one, so we're just going to do one episode covering the whole book and the one movie they made. Obviously, it'll be a little tough. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But we'll talk more about that in the next prequel episode. And we'll also hear what you all had to say about the Lorax. So if you have feelings about the Lorax adaptation or the book or just the movie or whatever, and you got something you want to say, make sure you get on over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever, Goodreads, and let us know so we can talk about that in 1 week's time on our prequel episode to Allegiant. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else,
keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
and keep being awesome.